Hello, everybody. How are you doing on this fine Wednesday night? Unusual Wednesday night show for us because I wanted to talk about something that, to be honest, I don't know if it really fits in our normal Sunday night show, but I found this I really wanted to dig into this topic of USL becoming D1, and then also touch a little bit on the NASL lawsuit. Right here. I'm talking this a little bit tonight. Where's I don't know. But you get it. Anyway, so we're going to get into that tonight, and I've got a great guest. You guys should all know Kartik Krishnaiyer, so he'll be joining us in just a second. But let's, as always, get to do some business, and that is Caneswear. Caneswear is where you got to go to buy all your Inter Miami gear. It has got the messiest wall in all of South Florida. Best prices in town. I was just at the stadium yesterday, and I was in the store, and they had good stuff, but they don't have as good of prices as Caneswear. So go to caneswear.com or visit the store in Davie off of 595 on University Drive. And if you want to buy or sell some property, Mia Rodrigues, the GOAT of all realtors, is who you need to talk to. She speaks 3 languages, so she'll understand you no matter what. So you can call her at 754-269-6923. Anything you want to buy or sell. And, you buy or sell with her, you might end up on her TV show, Selling Florida, The American Dream. It's shown on all these networks. So go and give Mia a call. All right. Well, I messed that up. Pushing buttons. Anyways. Let's get right to our topic at hand. Like I mentioned, I see a few of you guys in the chat. So as always, you have questions, we'll throw them out there. We'll jump in. But we're going to focus on the USL and a little bit of the NASL tonight. So let's get into it with our old buddy, Kartik Krishnaiyer, who I haven't seen. I don't think I've seen you, Kartik, in, I don't know, physically, has it been since I did that interview with the Miami FC head coach that many years ago, like 5 years ago or something? It's been forever, Kartik.
Yeah, since Paul Dalglish, right? You did an interview, great interview with Paul Dalglish for the show. I think it's been since then. You're at the Inter Miami matches. I'm at the Miami FC matches. So we're crossing each other on the road because I live north of Lockhart and you live south of Lockhart or south of Chase.
No, I live north.
You live north now. Okay.
I live north of you, Kartik, I think.
Oh.
I'm in Coconut Creek. And
I'm in Coral Springs. So
I'm just almost in Boca, right there in North Creek. So, driving to Miami in the future will be a long drive, but whatever. You do what you got to do for the love of the sport. But Kartik Krishnaiyer, if you guys don't know, he was the director of communications for the NASL, and that's one reason I want to touch on this lawsuit, because I think this has something, it plays a part in the story of USL launching a D1 as well. At least it's somewhat, I think, could be connected in some form or fashion, or at least worth talking about in the same show. But Kartik also has worked with Miami FC. You've worked with the Fort Lauderdale Strikers, and now you've got a really great website, Beyond the 90. Where's my little graphic? Right up above my head. Beyond the 90. So you could go to his website and check it out. So Kartik, how you been?
I'm doing great, Peter. It seems like the same conversation we were having 15 years ago, we're having again. What's old is new again, but it feels like the game is so much further along in this country than it was then. So that's the positive news.
Another thing that Kartik has done that you guys may not know about is he wrote a book called Soccer Wars. And you could get it on Apple Books. I was looking today, right? I was just wondering if it was available for me if I wanted to, because I do everything digital. So I wanted to know if it was there. And it is. And it is a term that a lot of people use. It is a term that's thrown around. But when I think of Soccer Wars, I think of you because of your book. So
thank you. I hope to think I coined the term, but not sure. I think I stole the term.
We're giving you credit here. It doesn't matter. So anyways, Kartik, let's start off with, since you have deep knowledge of the NASL, that version of the NASL that was really run by Traffic Sports, who got caught up in the whole FIFA scandal with Paola or whatever, a lot of things with the ownership for Miami FC at that time, the old Miami FC, and then Fort Lauderdale Strikers and all that kind of stuff. But they filed, the league folded, and they felt like there was an antitrust lawsuit that that there was a lawsuit to be had, right? That there was some collusion between U.S. Soccer and MLS to put the NASL out of business. Now this has gone to court. The court has said, you couldn't prove your case. But I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I know from being around the NASL and being a huge supporter of the NASL back in the day, kind of felt like we all knew that there was collusion and that MLS did not want the NASL to succeed. But what are your thoughts on the lawsuit and where it ended up?
Yeah, I was disappointed by the ruling because I think, as you said, those of us who were around then know there was some degree of collusion or feel there was some degree of collusion and felt like U.S. Soccer had put its finger on the scale. Now, what U.S. Soccer and MLS compellingly argued to the jury, a jury that is being introduced to these topics, right? They don't have the background.
They don't know soccer.
Yeah, they don't know soccer. Is that NASL had made some very poor business decisions, which I think you and I both agree with, that had actually hastened their demise, which I think there's no question about that also. But given that reality, my point has been that U.S. Soccer and MLS probably could have just let things run its course and the NASL would have gone under anyway. But instead, they tried to actively interfere with the marketplace, right? With competition. And you know better than anyone, Peter, because I think other than me hearing Aaron Davidson's boast, you were probably the person who heard them the most besides me.
I became very, very good friends with Aaron Davidson, and in all honesty, I kind of felt bad about it. But once he, got arrested and all the house arrest and all that kind of stuff, I never really reached out to him again. And but it probably should have. But now it's too long. But Aaron Davidson was a very nice man, full of bravado, and used to constantly. And here's part of where I think some of tonight's conversation with the NASL and USL can kind of tie together. Is he was very always talking about taking on the MLS, and I would tell him I was always, me and my a group of friends, we supported the NASL, we supported USL before that, but we always wanted the best professional soccer in our area, which at this time is MLS, right? So we were always pushing, and he would always push back saying, but who says that has to be MLS? He wanted to be that Division I league, and obviously the current ownership of NASL was that Rocco Camiso pushing for this lawsuit. Agree and felt like there was damages. And now it's funny is NASL in their statement basically took credit, said, okay, we lost, we're gonna repeal it, but we're appeal, not repeal. They're going to appeal it. They also claim that they did so much great things with this lawsuit for soccer in the United States. They even took credit for getting the women's national team a raise, which is kind of funny. What do you think this lawsuit? Now, ultimately, NASL failed. They were not able to prove collusion, even though we all think it was there. They just couldn't prove it. What do you think there was anything good that came out of this lawsuit?
Yeah, I think we had an honest conversation about the pro league standards. We had an honest conversation about Soccer United marketing and their role, which I think is what the NASL is alluding to, that the women's national team in their litigation and then their settlement with U.S. Soccer had pursued the angle of Soccer United marketing, taking money off of what the women's national team was generating and putting it back into MLS instead of putting it back into the women's game,
right,
or into the national team programs in general. So I think all of that was accomplished. Now, maybe that was part of a broader conversation because there were multiple lawsuits at once. There was the NASL lawsuit. There was the women's national team lawsuit. There was the U.S. Soccer Foundation lawsuit. There was our buddy down the road, Stephen Ross's lawsuit, right? Miami Dolphins owner, lawsuit against U.S. Soccer. And then there was also the litigation I was most directly involved in, which was at the Court of Arbitration on Sport. The kit you're wearing, our club, who I was working for at the time, who I again was working for this past season, just left for a third time. I left the club just a month or two ago. We sued or filed a claim, I should say is the correct term, against U.S. Soccer and CONCACAF and FIFA at the Court of Arbitration on Sport, along with our co-litigant, which was Stockade FC, an NPSL club owned by Dennis Crowley. Right. So there were 5 simultaneous court actions going on at once. I think they all contributed to this conversation, this healthy conversation we're having. But I don't want to say the NASL lawsuit itself was responsible for that conversation.
They sure did try to claim it.
In tandem. Yeah.
They tried to claim it in their press release. They tried to claim all these, holier than thou. We're doing this for the greatness of soccer and all that kind of stuff. And really, in all honesty, they're a business just like MLS is a business, and they're doing it for their bottom line, right? A lot of us that love the sport, and a lot of people will criticize. I don't want to get too much into MLS because that's really not what tonight is about. But a lot of people criticize MLS because it's too much of a business. Well, you know what? They're all a business. Every USL owner, every NASL owner, they want to make money. It's all a business, and they're not suing for 100% the betterment of an open league soccer or anything like that. I'm not saying they don't care, but they care about their bottom dollar more than anything else.
Yeah, and I think you're right on that. I think there was a lot of merit to the NASL lawsuit. I felt like maybe Rocco Commisso, a little bit of a look under the hood here. We at Miami FC and our owner, Ricardo Silva, felt that the thing that had to be done is you had to get promotion and relegation. You had to create.
We're going to get to that later for sure.
Yeah. But at the same time, Rocco Commisso, who owned the Cosmos and directed this NASL litigation, felt like you have to knock out the pro league standards. So even within NASL, there were 2 different approaches. I'm not sure which one was right and which one. I tend to think, and I'm saying this with full liberty and having worked on multiple times, 3 different times, as I said, under Mr. Silva. I think Commisso was probably right. I think the pro league standards are probably a bigger obstacle to anything than not having promotion and relegation. In fact, I think until you reform the pro league standards and you change the pro league standards, it's very difficult to envision a proper open system. It's also very difficult, I think, to do some of the things we want to do, like solidarity payments, maybe flip the calendar, which MLS is talking about doing currently. And I think probably will do if that's something we touch on later. It. Yeah. But I think to do all that stuff and get the most effect out of it, you probably need to knock out or at least change the PLS. So I think the Cosmos and Rocco probably had it right in that sense, that's the first thing you have to do.
All right. So let's move on to that and get into a little bit of talking about USL wanting to move to Division I, because those I always get it mixed up. Pro league standards, right? Is that what it's called? Or pro league standards? PLS. I want to say PSL, PLS, whatever, please.
PSL we're used to because it's Port St. Lucie.
Right.
Wasn't there also... No, he's living up there now.
Yeah. But USL with our old buddy, Paul McDonough, who's sometimes affectionately called Tubby here on this channel, was always very, very kind to me when he was with the Inter Miami. But, he has come out and said that they want to launch. He is now the president of USL, and he wants to launch a Division I league in 2027 or 2028. So obviously piggybacking off of the World Cup, kind of feels a little bit similar as to when MLS was launched right after the 94 World Cup. It seems to be like, hey, maybe there's a reason we're launching now, but also this NASL lawsuit it paves a way or a little bit for them. I don't know. It may at least shine a light on MLS colluding potentially with U.S. soccer. And because that light has been shown on them, they can't get involved this time. They can't be shown to be trying to squash another league. So I think that could be one benefit of that lawsuit. But Division One, what are your thoughts on Paul McDonough's ideas so far? Just on launching the league. I don't want to get into the other parts just yet, but launching a league in Division One, potentially challenging MLS.
Yeah, you and I both know McDonough. I covered him in Orlando also. So
right.
He is a great, great salesman. I mean, he's as good as it gets in the domestic game in this country. So what he says sounds very good. I mean, we're going to have to peel back the layers in a few minutes, right, on this. But I think in terms of the way they executed the rollout, it was perfect. And I've been highly critical, as many of you probably know, of USL in the past, and how they handle communications, how they communicate with people on the outside, how they represent themselves. But this rollout was as good as it gets. I do think they're trying to piggyback off of the World Cup, as you mentioned. I do also think they sense that two things. One, as you said correctly, U.S. soccer now will not try and put their fingers on the scale again because obviously we're in a position where they don't want to get sued again. Right. And they've already given D1 status to USL's Women's League, where Fort Lauderdale United, actually crossover game today, playing Gotham FC from NWSL at the stadium tonight. So they're both D1 leagues, although I think the market very clearly, I don't know what's going to happen in this individual match, but very clearly NWSL is being played at a very much higher level.
And a little bit, I want to dig into the Super League and comparing, what it is with Division One, but let's peel back the layers, like you said, a little bit more.
Yeah. So the last thing I was going to say here is that I think USL really believes, and this I can report from my off-the-record conversations with people. They really believe that JT Batson, as the executive director of U.S. Soccer, and Cindy Parlow-Cone as the president, are not going to get involved in trying to favor MLS quite the way that we all sense Sunil Gulati did,
right?
And that team that was there. I don't even want to finger the employees like Dan Flynn and Brian Remedi and others. I think it really was a Sunil thing. And Carlos Cordero, who's from here in Miami, right? We saw a transition under Cordero where U.S. Soccer began to take a little more of an even hand. And USL feels like that evolution's complete under Cindy Parlow-Cone, and that they are going to get a fair stick from the federation, which also indicates to me that, going back to your first topic, Peter, if NASL had just been a little more disciplined, maybe they could have gotten to 2019 or 2020 and Sunil was out of the way. And then U.S. Soccer isn't as freely colluding with MLS, but they didn't get to that point, right? They were quashed because of some self-inflicted errors before that.
Bravado, a lot of reasons with traffic sports. But so going back to those pro league standards, so that means the pro league standards, you have to have 12 to 14 teams to be in the Division One. You have to have, teams in the, I think, 3 or 4 time zones. That's not a problem. Stadiums of 15,000, which I think is a big problem. And I think there was one other point in the pro league standards that I think I'm missing.
Oh, the network. Oh, no, metropolitan areas.
A million people in a metropolitan area, which shouldn't be too difficult either. They're already in some big markets. But yeah, there's also got to be a big net worth. But even if the net worth part is, and that's not really being talked about as much, but I mean, they have to have that net worth to increase their stadium sizes and all that kind of stuff. It's a large ask to ask for these clubs that currently none of them have a 15,000 seat stadium out unless they're, Miami FC renting FIU. And I think there's one other college.
Birmingham is the other one. Yeah.
Right.
Both are terrible stadium situations.
Exactly.
I don't want to get too deep into it tonight, but the Miami FC situation at FIU is not tenable, which is why the club
moving to Homestead.
Moving on to Homestead.
But launching just saying I'm going to launch a Division I league is one thing, but actually physically doing it's a whole nother ask. And let me just start here. Do you think there's deep enough pockets in USL currently to at least get you almost there to 12 teams? Obviously, they're probably going to pull in some new. The fact that USL is more of an open, you run your own club. There is no, it's not like MLS that could, I think, maybe in interest some foreign investors, like a Citigroup type of situation, right? You want to create your team in say, I don't know, Jacksonville or something like that, and your affiliate there. But are there deep enough pockets within USL to really do this right? And that's what I really want to focus on, is doing it right.
Yeah, if they could start with 8, like you can in Division II, like NASL did, like NISA did. Well, NISA's a tire fire, but we'll not. But you could start with 8 in lower divisions. You have to get to 12 is the problem. There are several USL teams that can do it. Sacramento, they will have a 15,000 seat stadium, I think, eventually. They operate more or less. They're the one USL club, I would say, on the business side operates like an MLS club. I know there are a lot of lower division fans. We used to hear this in the NASL, right, Peter? And you and I would have to point out to people, even if on the pitch things look roughly similar, the front offices are not. Right, MLS is staffed in a certain way.
Sure.
There's a certain build out of an organization, as you see with Inter Miami, as I saw as Orlando City went from USL to MLS, what that involved with Paul McDonough actually leading the organization in one off season, how difficult, how much of a build that was. Sacramento is the only USL club that operates at an MLS standard from that perspective. They can make the move to MLS tomorrow. An academy at an MLS level. They have a supporters base at an MLS level, but that's one. They have an ownership group at an MLS level. They have a market size at an MLS level, D1 level. So Sacramento is one. San Antonio, Tampa Bay have, those two are in fairly big markets. Well, Tampa Bay is a very big market. San Antonio, little bit smaller market, that have ownership that can do it, but they don't have the right stadium size.
Right.
And I think it's for the Rowdies, Al Lang, you can't do anything with it, right? They're already repairing the stadium because it got damaged in the hurricane. They're going to spend the first month of the USL season on the road because repairs are ongoing at the stadium. So that's a question mark. Louisville, I think their ownership probably can do it, but you do have concerns about the size of that market, right? Is that a D1 market? Phoenix
I like that Louisville
would have to
stadium,
expand their stadium.
That stadium in Louisville is very nice.
Yeah, agreed. So I think they can do it. I think Phoenix is a large enough market. They need to expand their stadium, maybe diversify their ownership group. And then there are a few others. Rhode Island is kind of intriguing as a new team that could potentially do it. Orange County could potentially do it, but I think they need a better stadium situation. They need a better training ground situation. But we're still looking. I don't know how many clubs I mentioned, Peter, but that's still only like 7 or 8 clubs in USL currently.
And let's be honest.
And you need to get the 12.
Right, we're not there yet, and so you're asking for waivers. That's the big term. You're asking for waivers from the U.S. Soccer to forgive stadium size maybe a little bit, or potentially change the pro league standards, which that was also, I think, part of the NASL lawsuit that didn't. That obviously that didn't happen, but maybe there's a conversation that could be had there. I don't know, but when I think of Division I, I think of, and I haven't really heard anybody talking about this, is there's a certain look and feel that a Division I league has. There's a certain package that a Division I league has. There's a little glitz, a little glamour maybe. It's just a shinier product, right? And I know my camera's freezing up. I don't know why. But we've all been to USL games. They don't have that currently. There's a very different feeling walking into an Inter Miami stadium and walking into a Miami FC stadium. And it's not just the fact that one's empty and one's full. I mean, that does play a part. But it's the whole packaging. The TV product is very, very different. And I'm not talking about the streaming services, situation, but just the product that they're putting on the screen is very, very different. And I would have concerns that this Division One is just a slightly glamped up version of the championship. And that's not going to cut it in this country.
Yeah, those are all very, very valid concerns. I think from what I saw this go around with Miami FC, the season I spent with back with the club last season, I think I know that I don't want to speak out of turn here, but we operated at a much lower level than everybody else in the championship. So what I found is that Miami FC and the Strikers, right, who I'd worked for before, Fort Lauderdale,
right,
operated at kind of the median level or high level of the NASL. USL clubs have moved in the 5 years since I had left Miami FC the previous time, have moved well beyond. So that's something that encourages me, that you're right, they're not there yet, but going to a Louisville or going to a San Antonio or Detroit's one I forgot to mention. Detroit is another one. They have a look and feel that they're not a Division One level, but it feels like they're not the rinky-dink kind of minor league thing we were used to previously in USL and in MLS. So there's some sort of halfway stage the USL Championship is in now, with the exception of Miami FC and Loudoun and a few other clubs that are still lagging back. That encouraged me that think, okay, if you do Division One, you get better standards, higher standards, better owners, some investment from foreign investment. Maybe you can kick it up to that level. My concern about the production, though, you mentioned that the television production, and while
everything,
the matches they put on CBS last year, CBS Network Television looked impeccable. Same thing with most of the CBS Sports Network matches and some of the ESPN2 matches. When you get to watching the average USL Championship match on ESPN Plus or on Paramount Plus, it's just a huge drop off from watching MLS on Apple. It's just not even like we're not, again, like you said, Peter, we're not talking about streaming services. I know it is much easier to watch a USL match in this country right now than it is an MLS match. I concede that. You can get on ESPN Plus and watch it. More people have that than Apple Plus. But I'm talking about the actual production standard. I'm talking about the actual presentation.
Exactly.
The graphic.
Right.
Not having the production mistakes. I've noted my colleague Jonathan Starling at Beyond the 90, I think, would note every week in his column there was one or two production mistakes during a USL Championship match on either on Paramount Plus or on ESPN Plus. And you just don't see that in the production of MLS matches on Apple. So even though you could say, and I know people who in the last few years who used to kind of mock me for following lower divisions and we're big MLS fans, who are now telling me, oh, we're watching as much USL because it's more accessible to us because we have Android phones or whatever. We don't want to pay Apple, whatever their reasoning is. They still would concede if I pressed them that, okay, even if you're not watching Apple, the production level is a whole lot better. Sure. And that screams major league, right? Whereas the production that USL gives you does not scream major league.
Yeah, and again, it's more than just the whatever glitches they may have, just the way the stadiums look on TV. I mean, you look at a game with Miami FC and the way their field looks on TV. It looks gray. First off, it looks gray. Yeah. It looks awful. Yeah. And then you look at a game that's at just up the road a little bit at Inter Miami, and it just visually looks different. And I think that is all very important because if you're going to ask you're going to ask people to come into this new league. So from what I understand, to jump into the championship right now, it's about $20 million, right?
Yeah.
So you assume creating Division I league, it's going to be at least double, 100 million?
Yeah,
50?
yeah, you would think it would be 75 to 100 million. And on your point about Miami FC, we were the one team last season that was not given a home game. That our home stadium was not shown on any of USL's broadcast partners. We didn't have a game on CBS. We didn't have a game on ESPN. We didn't have a game on Golazzo channel. We didn't have a home game on 2DNA for that reason, because the field is not presentable.
Right.
As I said, the organization is taking steps. I was part of that process to get us out of there. So we'll have a beautiful new stadium in a few years. But you're right. Miami FC is an example. I think Loudoun is an example. Empty seats in this kind of, even for a small stadium, feeling kind of cavernous. You have other stadiums in USL that look like they're multi-purpose stadiums. Tulsa is one. Detroit is going to get out of their stadium. It gives a great atmosphere, but it doesn't scream major league to you, right?
Right. They're building their own, right?
Yeah. And Oakland is going to be stuck in the Coliseum, which will get them D1 standards, right? That will make, in terms of attendance or capacity, but I think that's going to be a problem in terms of optics. MLS had this problem the first however many years when they were in football stadiums.
Sure.
I still think they have a problem showing games in New England. I think that's a problem for MLS when they have to show nationally televised games from Foxborough. USL has to figure out between now and 2027 which are the teams to take to D1, partly based on that. So to answer your question about the cost, we assume it'll be somewhere between 75 and 100 million. And then what USL can say is, we're getting you a ticket to D1 without paying 500 million.
Sure.
Which you have to pay to join MLS.
Yeah, and that is definitely attractive. But and again, just thinking of perception, if I go into a stadium now, I know USL, they're what they really hang their hat on is being a community teams. They really embed themselves in the community, so a team, and again, Miami FC is probably not a good example, but maybe a team like Tampa Bay that's got a nice fan base, that maybe is a very community-driven team, and you compare it to something like, say, an Inter Miami. Inter Miami, their visions are global. They say it. They never talk about community, really. Let's be honest. They say La Familia, but that's global. They want to be global. Their vision is global. USL, whether it's realistic or not, it's a whole nother story. But USL really hangs their hat on being a community-driven league. And so that can be definitely very, very attractive to people. But I think that, to fill 15,000 seat stadiums, you need more than that. And you need that packaging that I was talking about, that perception that I'm walking into something that is major league, something that's not, because USL does have that minor league tag on it, partially because people don't understand what Division II means in this country, or partially it's, I think, because of the way it looks and feels. It doesn't give you that feel of, major league. And if I'm a big investor, am I willing to spend $100 million? That's just to get in the door. Now I got to also build a stadium or improve my stadium or rent a stadium, whatever. There's the investment is much, much greater. And I'm just concerned that USL rolls out a Division I league and it just feels like championship. Using Super League as an example, it's Division I women's. I've been to one of their games. I want to go to more. I did enjoy myself. Me and about 100 people. We were all there. And it says it's Division I, but it definitely doesn't present itself like the NWSL does.
No, not
so
even
what
close.
Does Division I mean in that case? It means nothing, at least with that example.
Yeah, I don't think the gap between MLS and the new USL D1 will be quite as wide. It'll be wide. I mean, we'll talk about that. I don't think it's going to be quite as stark as this USL Super League and NWSL, because these were all new clubs that were being launched. They did it very, very kind of piecemeal to the point where a couple of teams and ownership groups dropped out within 6 months of the league starting, USL Super League.
Right.
Tucson, Phoenix Rising was going to attach their women's team and go into Super League. They were unhappy with what they saw as the direction of the league from USL HQ. They dropped out. Loudoun United's ownership dropped out, leaving everything for that DC team, which is a real embarrassment, that DC team, DC Power, to DC United. So you've basically got half the ownership that got let in. I don't think it'll be quite that wide, but your point is very well taken, because you can say they're both Division One, but the market will clearly determine NWSL is here. Well, you can't see my arms, but NWSL is emphatically better than USL Super League. There's no comparison between the two. So having learned this lesson, I think USL has to get it right with the launch of the D1 league, which means you have to take your best men's teams already. We talked about Sacramento. That's an automatic. But you have to get the 5 or 6 more prepared in the next 2 seasons to make that jump in 27. If 27 is, in fact, the year you're going, maybe they start in 28.
Right.
I think some of the newer clubs that are coming in, Jacksonville is one, where there's a possibility of them being Division One. They need to operate at that level from the get-go. And talking to that ownership group, their ambition is to be D1. So I think that they are going to staff up more on a Sacramento model than on a Tampa Bay model, if you want to look at it that way, or a Miami FC model, if you want to look at the extreme other example. But your point is really well taken, because USL has made itself a community-oriented. Its clubs are community-oriented. So I take the example of Orange County SC. They have about 1,000 to 1,500 diehard fans, supporters. They have a great supporters group, travels to the other games when they play in California, when they play Sacramento, Oakland, Monterey Bay, Phoenix is nearby. So you would think, based on that, considering the size of their market, because they are in the LA market, they would have 10 or 15,000 people at their games. But no, they have that 1,500 diehard in the community, so influential in the community, they were able to block LA Galaxy 2 from coming into their area, and LA Galaxy 2 instead moved north to Ventura County. So that was a big victory for USL. But yet they still only get 35 or 4,000 fans realistically a game.
Right.
Because beyond that hardcore fan base and those community partnerships, like those local sponsorships each of these clubs have gotten, and most USL clubs have done a very good job of getting like a local insurance agent, a local car dealer, a local print shop, a local technology company to sponsor them. They don't have those blue ticket sponsors that MLS clubs get. They don't have, and they just do not appeal to the casual sports fan the way MLS clubs do.
Does Division One get you those sponsors?
I guess you would have to somehow create. Well, okay. Let me dial that back. Yes, I think that's the hope. And we used to hear this from Aaron, you and I also, that if NASL became Division One, we get Coca-Cola, or MLS had Coca-Cola, so we'll get Pepsi. They have Home Depot, so we'll get Lowe's. They have Walmart, or they have Target now. They had Walmart then. They have Target now, so we'll get Walmart. It depends how well USL is able to sell to those entities. Do USL's sponsorship sales for a league with its profile nationally, with the number of clubs it has between all its divisions, men's and women's, is really kind of weak. If you look at it, they don't have very many league sponsors. I think the Jägermeister Cup was a nice thing. They got a good, decent sponsor for that. That was pretty good. They have a couple of other decent sponsors that present their broadcasts. Prinks Tires, a few others, but they don't have the blue chip sponsorships that a league that is in as many big markets as they are in Division 2 and now has a Division 1 women's league should be in. They don't have those sorts of sponsors. So does being Division 1 get them that? They think it will. Now, if it doesn't, Peter, then we're looking at a Division 1 league, a designated D1 league that really looks like a D2. I think it's really critical. Sponsors.
And that's what I'm afraid of. And so obviously the conversation has come up. What is the differentiator? What makes joining USL Premier League. I've heard that USL Premier has already been copyrighted or trademarked. So that may be a name they're looking at.
They follow the English naming convention. USL, every league is named the same as it is in England. So that was an obvious one. Right?
Yeah. Shocker. So, but Paul McDonough has dropped the Pro-rel, that everybody thinks they want. I don't know if they really do want it, but and I don't know if the owners really do want it, but he's mentioned it and gotten everybody hungry and thinking about it. I from basically what I gathered from some of the interviews I've seen from Paul McDonough, it doesn't sound like something they would be interested in instituting on day one, right? It's something that they would work towards. Maybe it's 5 years into the league before you institute Pro-rel. But everybody wants soccer fans want it. Americans won't understand it, but we're hoping that there's enough soccer fans out there that, that it can work. But that's the only thing I think that is a real differentiator. The thing that can make them stand above, not above MLS, but, some sort of a threat to them, right? Is that they're offering something that soccer fans want that MLS is not offering. I don't know how it would work. It's the same problem that you have with MLS. You've got an owner that pays $500 million to join the MLS. You're going to tell him your $500 million is now because you had a bad first season or whatever, you're getting demoted down into the next league. Now that value of $500 million is like maybe worth $100 million, right? It's worth a lot. Or in this example of USL, your $100 million investment is now only worth $20 million because you've been relegated. So I don't even know how the $100 million owners that are going to buy into Division One are going to be any different than the owners from MLS. I don't know if they're going to be interested in this either, although Paul McDonough feels like they will be.
Yeah, and here's another thing I've heard since McDonough first tried to push a vote on Pro-rel now 18 months ago. There was a Board of Governors meeting in August of 2023 in Colorado Springs where they were planning on having the vote, and they had to scrap the vote because there was a lot of negative feedback from owners. Some of the negative feedback, Peter, believe it or not, and this is going to shock the Pro-rel bros out there on Twitter and these people who think everything is about the upward mobility. Some of the feedback that they heard, and I was reflected to me as a reporter, was that there were owners in the lower divisions of USL or in the championship, if you put a D1 in, that were concerned that, oh my goodness, if we get promoted, we're going to bankrupt our club because we're going to have to meet a higher standard. We're going to have to travel more. We're going to have to pay players more. Are big enough. We're going to have to make all of those changes. And that's going to be a problem. So there were some of those also. Now, I think there probably will be some people, some owners, if they buy in at $100 million, that don't want to take that risk either. Although I do think ultimately it is a differentiator. And if you can give certain guarantees in terms of revenue, you can give certain guarantees in terms of TV money, even if you get relegated, it probably goes ahead. But I'll tell you one chink in all of this, and I alluded to it earlier. For me, there are 2 or 3 potential differentiators that USL could employ for their entire league system to differentiate them from MLS. As Americans get more weaned onto soccer with a World Cup coming here, more excited about the European game, and people, because we know there's a whole pool of soccer fans in this country that MLS has not captured, right? But if MLS does shift its calendar, Peter, I think that's a sign of authenticity and an alignment of transfer windows that really gives MLS a boost. And those of you who paid attention to me for a number of years probably know I've talked about calendar change as much as I've talked about promotion and relegation. And I didn't expect MLS to be the league to actually do it. I thought they would be the league to resist it, but they're understanding, I think, some of their newer owners understand where the market is. And the market is in an August to May league, not in a February to November league.
Yeah, and Paul McDonough did say on Morning Footy on the Golasso Network that is not uh, in their plans in the near future. They're planning on sticking to the standard season that we're currently used to. Even though they're doing it differently in the Super League, there's the planning on doing just our normal play through the summer kind of thing that we're doing here. So yeah, the only differentiator for USL one right here is this Pro-rel. That maybe, and also like I said, the fact that the clubs really do control their club. There's not the overarching rules, and those people that dislike MLS, I know some of those people dislike MLS because it feels, well, it's because it feels so manufactured and everything like that. Well, everything's manufactured, but they also, because they don't like the single entity setup, and so each USL club can kind of do their own thing, and that could be attractive to investors, along with the promotion relegation. But going with the promotion relegation, Ed is in the chat, and he asked, I'm just like, what your thoughts are in that. Oops, let's move this up a little bit. How would Pro-rel work? Would Win Division 2 pay a fee to go up? Because it costs more to get into the Premier League than it did to get into Championship. Are you gonna have to pay a difference?
Yeah, so that's that's a great question, Ed. I mean, that is part of the concern that I know some USL Championship owners had about promotion and relegation a year and a half ago, was not that they would have to pay a fee to go up, but that they would then have a much higher cost structure suddenly. Suddenly you're paying much higher salaries. Although I have to tell you, I'm concerned about the salary level in USL Championship as it is for D2. It's far beyond what it was in the NASL when the NASL went under. Now USL has a greater infrastructure, so you don't see clubs collapsing yet the way they did in NASL, but it could happen, because I mean, this is probably a conversation for another time, but because the USL now has a players union and there's a collective bargaining agreement, there are certain minimum spends that we didn't have in the NASL. And so USL clubs now are spending a lot more on players than, as much as we thought the Cosmos were spending and Miami FC was spending, everybody in USL spending a lot more than that now. Would they pay a fee to go up? I think there would be probably some sort of nominal fee, but it wouldn't be, hey, you paid 20 million to get in, now you have to pay 80 more million. I think it would be something like maybe $1 million or $2 million. And I do think USL, Paul McDonough has indicated this, from what I understand, to individual owners, that and this again, I think would just apply to Sacramento, Phoenix, maybe Tampa Bay, San Antonio, maybe those are your four, that the initial batch of USL Championship clubs that are taken up would not have to pay anything more than maybe $5 million. However, if there's another bunch of Championship clubs that want to move up after year one, before promotion and relegation is instituted, they're going to have to pay full fee, even though they're in USL already. So jockeying for those first few spots is going to be important. And how would the relegation work, I think, is also equally important, because there is a need to then offset owners with television money or sponsorship money or something that they might lose if they get relegated. So USL has to figure that part out as well, in addition to making the divisions roughly even in terms of teams. Right now, the USL Championship has more clubs than USL League One. And while League One keeps making these expansion announcements, Sarasota and Fort Wayne both in the last week, talking about finances, I'm concerned. We saw 2 USL League 1 teams collapse this past year. I'm thinking you're going to see several more in the next few years, because the cost structure in that league, that's a third division, and they're traveling cross country, and that just doesn't work.
Yeah, and you for the Pro-rel to work, you also have to get all owners of all these divisions to buy in. Yep. That's going to be a struggle beyond struggles, right? Francisco Garcia brings up in the chat, in South America, you do see some second division teams at the end of the season trying not to promote, to maintain their cost structure, at least the owners or owner cost structure. So you got teams that are tanking it on purpose just because, I can't afford to increase my stadium from, say, 7,000 to 15,000. I can't afford the better players I'm going to have to pay. I mean, there's a lot. The pro league standards, in some ways are really going to put a strangle on the idea of promotion and relegation.
Yeah, I think that the PLS makes promotion and relegation very difficult, which is why I came around to the point of view, even though I was involved with Miami FC's litigation, and the Cosmos and NASL went in a different direction. Obviously, we supported them. We were in NASL. But still, they went in a different direction with knocking out the PLS. I came around to the conclusion that the Cosmos had it right. That you have to knock out the PLS. NASL had it right before you do Pro-rel. And I think that's something going back to our days when we talked about promotion and relegation in the early days of NASL with Fort Lauderdale, with the Fort Lauderdale Strikers. We didn't quite get that. And I guess the Strikers were the one team that could have met the stadium standard and the ownership standard, because Traffic did have the money, and obviously we were playing at Lockhart. But right. And Fort Lauderdale was a big enough market. But these things make it difficult because there are teams that could get promoted that won't be eligible because of stadium size or ownership net worth or ownership structure or metropolitan area. So you could see exactly what Francisco is talking about there. And as I said earlier, that was a concern expressed to me, and I know was expressed to Paul McDonough also by some owners. Hey, we don't mind the relegation part. We mind the promotion part because we may not be able to afford it.
Yeah, and going back to the whole thing about Division I needing to be packaged better, it needs to look better. There needs to be a reason for me to want to be promoted. Like you said, there's got to be more than just, I'm going to get a little bit more on TV money. There's got to be a lot more, right? There's got to be a lot more in sponsorships. There has to be something that's really tangible, that is a carrot that I'm reaching for.
There has to be something tangible in general, because I'll just express to you my view of our neighbors, of the Tampa Bay Rowdies. Mm-hmm. They have put so much money into that club. They have won so much in USL. I mean, they haven't actually won the championship, but they've gotten to a couple finals.
They're always good.
They're always in the top of the Eastern Conference. They've won. They're always in the top 2 or 3 in the Eastern Conference, right? And there are people close to that organization who are telling me we've got nothing from it. It hasn't done us any good to win the Eastern Conference however many times. It hasn't done us any good to be in the final however many times. We're not getting anything from it. So that's, and I'm sure it's not just the Rowdies. I'm sure that San Antonio is feeling that way, and Phoenix is feeling that way, and Louisville's feeling that way. So USL has to give something tangible at the end of this, monetarily or sponsorship-wise.
And that's where U.S. Soccer could come in and say, you're going to get a berth in the CONCACAF Champions Cup.
Yeah.
Right? Potentially a berth in the Club World Cup. I don't know. Hey, let's since we're playing around in with Monopoly money, maybe get them into the Leagues Cup that nobody likes. But MLS will never let that happen. But it'd be cool. Yeah, right. It'd be cool, if there was some cooperation amongst the leagues. That'd actually be really neat. But and there was cooperation with MLS and USL for a while. But that cooperation, I think, was partially to put NASL out of business. That was, right? So
that was exactly
that's done.
So
we don't need to cooperate
the irony
anymore.
Of this whole thing, Peter. I think this is the dirty little secret no one wants to talk about. That the actual beneficiary of the alleged conspiracy may have been USL itself. They're the ones still in business. They're the ones talking about launching a D1 league, right?
Sure. Yeah. But, so yeah, there's got to be Francisco's also just saying TV money makes the football world go round. But let's be honest, the TV money for USL being on ESPN Plus or CBS, they're probably losing money to getting it on those channels. I mean, I know in the past, some of these leagues have paid to get onto these platforms. So, which, USL fanboys, people that just really, like I said, despise MLS, and some people really do. I think it is just a vocal minority, but you're probably around these people a lot more than I am.
Yeah.
Maybe it is more people than I really give it credit for. But I feel like it's a vocal minority based on look at the crowd in the stadiums. But, that vocal minority gets excited about this and potentially the opportunity to rival MLS, to be a real challenge to MLS. Do you think USL Division I can ever get there? MLS has a 30-year head start on this Division I thing, so I'm not so sure.
Do I think they can ever quite get there? Yes, eventually. Although I have to tell you again, this may seem odd to some of our viewers, but I think if MLS shifts its calendar, I think that's a really big deal.
Right.
The way I view global football. And one of my critiques, and Peter, I've been a pretty persistent critic of MLS.
Yes,
one of my critiques has been the calendar. And I'm going to tell you, if they do shift the calendar, I'm going to think, hey, MLS is learning. They're taking a step forward. Because a key thing about the calendar, the point I've always made is if you don't align your transfer windows with Europe, you can't do as much in terms of player sales. Even though you got these great academies now in MLS, USL has some great academies. You can't move.
They need to invest more in that area. When we're talking about MLS and the money, there's a lot of infrastructure that you don't really think about. We're talking about the packaging. Well, forget about that. The training facilities and all that kind of stuff. USL's training facilities, I'm sure, and their academies are a much lower quality and lower level than that of a Division
Again,
I.
With the one exception of Sacramento. In fact, I was talking to a former Portland Timbers, former member of the Timbers technical staff the other day, who told me the only USL academy that could rival their academy in Portland that they had was the Sacramento Academy. They're the exception. Just like you have Miami FC, which has been a blight on the league, quite frankly. I say that I'm ashamed of that as someone who's been in that club and supports that club. That's the club I support. And then you have Sacramento on the other end that operates like an MLS club, but the rest of the teams don't operate at Sacramento's level. So I do feel I feel like I probably shouldn't keep saying, Peter, hey, well, Sacramento has this, Sacramento has that, because they're an exception.
It's only one team. You need 12 of those.
Yeah, and can they rival them? They have to improve their academies, which I think Paul McDonough knows.
Yeah,
coming from the agency world, coming from the player development world.
He helped build Inter Miami's academy. Our whole system right now, he helped build.
Yep, and Orlando City's and Atlanta.
And Atlanta, yeah.
And I saw what he did in Orlando. I mean, he was able to really kind of tie together relationships with local youth clubs. Well, actually, he did that here too, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. FC and others. Yeah, he did a very good job with that. So he understands that. I know he's been leading an initiative from the league level. They brought in the technical director from Orange County SC, who's one of the clubs that does have a very good academy, and made him the technical director of the league. But you have to build that out. And again, this comes back to the overriding point. Why USL has these fanboys who are very vocal and are able to sustain these clubs at a D2 level, but they're not the mass numbers of people who watch MLS, as you said. The individual ownership model of USL, the individual club independence model means the league has to do more to incentivize the clubs to do these things. Because I know clubs are always watching the bottom line, right? You talked about money at the outset. And USL has put a bunch of suggestions, recommendations from a technical perspective on their championship clubs that a lot of the championship clubs financially are just not in a position to meet. And it's not like MLS, where as a single entity league, they will then kick money to, because there are Miami FC equivalents in MLS. There's the Chicago Fire. I mean, very, very plainly, there's Chicago. But MLS can kick them money through the single entity structure to try and mask that, which you can't do in USL. So that's
Chicago
part of
does
the
have a newer owner, so maybe that'll change. Yeah. But you also have teams like Colorado Rapids, so they may have good facilities, but nobody goes, nobody cares.
Yeah, that's another example. Yeah. So here's where USL Division I can rival MLS. The Colorado example is a great segue, because I've been told off the record by people associated with this USL venture. Watch Dallas. Peter, a market you're familiar with. Watch Dallas specifically. USL likely will put a Division I team in Dallas. They feel like, in spite of how great FC Dallas's academy is, that they have not captured that market.
Nope.
We can put a team in another Dallas suburb, build a similar academy, although I think that's easier said than done, but still build an academy and compete. So what they might do is they might pick Dallas, Atlanta, because it's just the size of the market and soccer scope. Avoid competing in places like Philadelphia. Avoid competing in places like Kansas City and Nashville, where Charlotte, right, where MLS is doing so well. Avoid competing in Orlando. But pick some of these other places where they don't think MLS is doing as well. Try and compete head-to-head there, and then find other Division I, maybe Division I light markets. Jacksonville's not really a Division I market, but you could make the case.
You could consider them. I mean, look, they have an NFL team, right?
Yeah, that's
barely.
True. Yeah.
I mean, nobody goes, but they do. And so, if you're a big enough city to have an NFL team, I think it's fair to say you're big enough to have a Division I soccer team.
So the markets I've heard about maybe being the new teams have been Oklahoma City, Jacksonville, Milwaukee, and potentially one or two others like that. Now, those are all cities that have other major league sports teams, but do not have MLS teams, or never going to have MLS teams. So that makes sense. But then where they're going to try and compete head-to-head with MLS, I mentioned Dallas. That's the one I know for sure. That's the one that was mentioned to me. And it's logical. Like Dallas, you could argue, maybe the best soccer city in the United States, or soccer. I know people in South Florida don't want to hear this, but the DFW Metroplex might be the best soccer market in the country. I mean, just top to bottom, even amateur teams, Peter, NPSL teams get huge crowds there.
Yeah, but FC Dallas doesn't, which is the interesting thing, right? Yeah, that which is an interesting thing. We should start wrapping this up. I know you and I could probably talk all night about this, but one thing I thought also that could differentiate USL Division I is if they really put a larger focus on the American player. Because I kind of harp on that a little bit with say Inter Miami. I joke about it a little bit because Inter Miami every other day is getting another international roster slot that they've traded for. So I think if I remember correctly, you're only allowed to have 6 per league, but then you can buy them, right? You can just trade for an unlimited number, right? And we have if you look at our starting lineup with Inter Miami, very few Americans. There's a couple, very few Americans. So where, at the end of the day, I may sound a little bit critical of this Division I for USL, only because I've been around USL and I'm skeptical, right? But more soccer, more Division I soccer, it's better for everybody. You have more choices, but also maybe for the American player, more opportunities for the American player that may not be getting time, or maybe they are on, say, Inter Miami. Ryan Saylor, for example, is a player that's a defender on Inter Miami that just sits the bench, but could be a starter on a USL Premier League team potentially.
It's funny you mentioned him specifically. I'll tell you after the show why. But he's a great example. So there's several players like him that I think could be a starter on a USL Premier League team and get minutes, and maybe even work their way into the national team picture. Sure. And this is something with USL's academies they have to do. Really focus on the local player, really focus on the homegrown American player. Now, there have been complaints from some executives in USL that USL does the same thing with roster spots where you have academy spots and all this stuff. You can sign guys to academy contracts like MLS, but they only allow domestic players to fit into that. So, for example, we had a Haitian player that came through our academy at Miami FC that we weren't able to sign until we freed up a foreign roster spot midway through the season last season. And we weren't the only club complaining about that. But the USL has come back to us and said, hey, Miami FC, hey, El Paso. I think they're one of the other clubs that complained. The reason for this is we want local guys coming through the academies. We want to make these clubs as local as possible. So that's something else. You could have an emphasis on local players, which I've always faulted Orlando City for being a club sitting in the middle of Florida that never signed Dax McCarty or Graham Zusi, who are from the Orlando area, right?
Oh, are they?
Yeah, they both are.
I think Dax McCarty, I think Dallas, because that's where he started his professional career.
Never made the effort to sign those guys, right? And several others. Miami FC's been a little better, or Inter Miami's been a little better about that, right? Well, some local
We've got
guys.
quite a few Miami kids on that team.
Yeah, but more MLS teams are like Orlando than are like Inter Miami with that.
Sure.
So I think that's another place where USL Division I has an opportunity because local relevance. I've realized that, Peter, with college sports, right? College sports remains relevant in the United States in a world of pro sports, largely because the players on college football and college basketball teams tend to be more localized than players on major league teams in all the professional sports.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you and I could go on all night about this. I think we've had many conversations along these lines in the past about where the lower levels could go, and those conversations with Aaron Davidson were always fun. But we're here again. Soccer wars are heating up again. What I've heard rumors that USL could announce some of their first clubs within the next couple months. Cities that would be in this new league. So we should start seeing some positive movement. I guess let's finish with this one final question, go a little bit long. Do you think they get approved? This still has to go through a voting process. And just because USL wants to do this does not mean it's going to happen. Do you think they get across the finish line?
So right before we get to that, I was going to say, as you mentioned, Aaron Davidson, so much of what Paul McDonough says could have come out of Aaron Davidson's mouth 15 years ago. It sounds very similar. But of course, you and I both know Paul, and we know he has more of an ability to deliver maybe than Aaron did. Do they get approved? I think they do, Peter, but I'm putting a caveat on that. I think it's going to be 2028. That's my sense. That it's going to take.
That's fine.
They'll get approved because they'll get to 12 clubs that meet the standards, but they're not going to. I just think doing it in what would it be now? 24 months. I just don't think they have enough time to do it. So I think maybe they punt. However, they position that publicly. They'll say, hey, changes in the market, whatever. But I think they'll get approved. They'll get to 12 teams, but I think it'll be 2028.
All right. Well, Kartik, again, we could continue this conversation all night, but I know you have a really good website, Beyond the 90. So what's going on there? What are you doing on that website, and tell everybody how to find it.
Yeah, it's beyondthe90.net or beyondthe90.substack.com. It's on Substack, but you can go to beyondthe90.net and get to it. We cover mostly lower division soccer, USL, NISA, NPSL. League for Clubs is a new entrant this year. Don't be surprised if in the future Inter Miami maybe puts their 3 team. You have Inter Miami 2 in MLS Next Pro, and Inter Miami 3, which is basically in UPSL now. Don't be surprised if that team ends up in League for Clubs in the future. So a lot of exciting things happening at the lower division level. We cover lower division soccer closely. We're moving more to podcasts and videos. It's been heavy written content the last few seasons. And we do emphasize the Florida clubs. So there's more Miami FC and Tampa Bay Rowdies coverage and Fort Lauderdale United and Tampa Bay Sun coverage than the other clubs around the country.
Great. So, and of course, everybody can follow you on Twitter. The tag is on the screen, KKFLA737. Follow everything that Kartik does. Again, if we have a lot of people here that watch this that I've only been introduced to U.S. soccer because of Messi and because of Inter Miami, right? So they may not know you yet, but they should and definitely need to check out Beyond the 90. I mean, Kartik is a wealth of knowledge. I mean, so he's been in this game for a long time. So definitely need to check out everything he's doing. But this has been a lot of fun for curious to see what the numbers will be for this and how many people on our little part of the internet really care about USL. But this is definitely an interesting story. I love following startup teams, startup leagues. I find it super interesting with the USFL, all that kind of stuff. So this, I'm dying to see how it goes. And, obviously the more football out there, the better for everybody. So, of course, hoping that this does well. But thanks a lot, Kartik, for joining us. And maybe I could convince you to join me at an Inter Miami game.
Yeah. I actually
got a ticket.
Yeah, I'll be happy to do so. And I have to talk to our friend Ravi Saka too about the Open Cup match against Inter Miami too. That's going to be fun.
Oh yeah, that'll be good. Well, anyways, hopefully I can convince you to join me at an Inter Miami game, and that'll be a lot of fun catching up. And because I know you're a little bit of anti-MLS, and I would, maybe I don't, you got to go, you got to see it, you got to, see the new version, have some fun.
I got to see it this year because
exactly. All right, Kartik, thanks so much for joining me, and everybody, please like, share, and subscribe, and go to Beyond the 90. Thanks, everybody.